Racist cop slaps black woman at courthouse gate, then learns. She's the new judge. What if one moment of prejudice could change the course of justice itself? The morning air carried the familiar scent of coffee and fresh hope as 38-year-old Judge Patricia Washington adjusted her briefcase outside the Hamilton County Courthouse. She dreamed of this day for 20 years, her first morning as the youngest black woman ever appointed to the bench in this district. The limestone steps seemed to shimmer in the early sunlight, each one representing another barrier she'd overcome through law school, years as a prosecutor, and countless nights studying while raising her daughter alone. Patricia had always believed that justice wasn't just about the law. It was about dignity, fairness, and treating every person as if they mattered. Her grandmother's wedding ring, now worn on her right hand, caught the light as she smoothed her judicial robes one final time. She never imagined that before she could even reach her chambers, she'd face a test that would define not just her first day, but the very principles she'd sworn to uphold. Where are you watching from today? The trouble started at the courthouse security entrance. Officer Marcus Blake had worked courthouse security for 15 years, and he developed his own ideas about who belonged in the halls of justice and who didn't. As Patricia approached the metal detector, her judicial parking pass visible on her briefcase, she noticed Blake's eyes narrow as they took in her appearance. A young black woman in professional attire, clearly not fitting whatever image he expected. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong line," Blake announced loudly, causing several lawyers and court staff to turn and stare. "Public access is around the side entrance." Patricia smiled politely, though her stomach tightened with a familiar tension. "Good morning, officer. I'm Judge Washington. Today's my first day, so I'm still getting familiar with the procedures." Blake's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Judge? Right. Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to move along. This entrance is for court personnel and attorneys only." The morning rush of lawyers and clerks began to slow as people noticed the commotion. Patricia felt the familiar weight of being the only black face in a sea of expectations. She'd faced this before, in law school lecture halls, at bar association events, in courtrooms where opposing counsel assumed she was a defendant rather than an attorney. "Officer Blake," she read his nameplate carefully, keeping her voice calm and professional. "I understand the confusion. Here's my judicial identification." She reached into her briefcase, producing the leather folder containing her credentials. But Blake stepped back, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "Don't reach for anything. Keep your hands where I can see them." The courthouse lobby, usually bustling with the quiet efficiency of legal proceedings, had gone nearly silent. Patricia realized that everyone was watching. Clerks, attorneys, even Judge Harrison emerging from the elevator, all witnessing what should have been her triumphant first morning becoming something else entirely. And what happened next would be discussed in courthouse corridors for months to come. Instead of examining Patricia's credentials, Officer Blake seemed to interpret her calm professionalism as defiance. His voice grew louder, more aggressive, drawing even more attention to the scene. "I've been working security here for 15 years, and I know every judge in this building. You're not a judge, you're not supposed to be here, and you need to leave. Now." Patricia felt her grandmother's ring against her finger, a reminder of the strength that had carried their family through much worse than this. "Officer, I'm simply asking you to look at my identification. I'm scheduled to meet with Chief Judge Morrison at 8:30. "Stop lying." Blake's face had flushed red. "Chief Judge Morrison is in meetings all morning. I know his schedule." But Patricia knew something Blake didn't. Judge Morrison had specifically requested an early meeting to welcome her and review her first week's docket. She'd received the call personally just 2 days ago. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She was being denied entry to the very building where she was meant to ensure justice for others. Attorney Sarah Chen, who'd worked in the courthouse for over a decade, stepped forward hesitantly. "Officer Blake, perhaps we could just—" "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you?" Patricia watched Blake's body language shift into something more threatening. His hand moved to his belt, and she recognized the posture from her years as a prosecutor, someone escalating rather than de-escalating. The early morning sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows seemed to highlight the absurdity of the moment. A black woman being treated as a threat in the very halls where she was meant to dispense justice. "Officer," Patricia said quietly, "I'm going to slowly reach for my phone to call Chief Judge Morrison's office. You can watch my hands the entire time. You're not calling anyone. You're leaving. Right now." The tension in the lobby was palpable. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Patricia realized she stood at a crossroads that would test everything she believed about patience, dignity, and the long arc of justice. The moment that changed everything happened so quickly that later, witnesses would struggle to agree on the exact sequence of events. Patricia, moving slowly and deliberately, reached toward her briefcase to retrieve her phone. Blake, perhaps startled by the motion, perhaps driven by something deeper and uglier, reacted with a violence that shocked everyone present. The slap echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Patricia's head snapped to the side, her grandmother's ring catching the light as her hand instinctively rose to her burning cheek. The briefcase fell from her other hand, spilling papers across the polished floor, including her judicial appointment letter, bearing the official seal of the state judiciary. The silence that followed was deafening. Blake seemed to realize immediately that he'd crossed a line no officer should ever cross. But instead of apologizing, instead of stepping back, he doubled down. "That's what happens when you don't follow instructions," he said. And though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence, Patricia stood perfectly still, her cheek throbbing, her mind racing through 2 decades of legal training and a lifetime of navigating moments exactly like this. She thought of her daughter, who would start law school in the fall. She thought of her grandmother, who had cleaned these very courthouse floors decades ago, never imagining her granddaughter would one day sit in judgment here. She thought of every black woman who'd come before her and everyone who would come after. Attorney Chen rushed forward to gather the scattered papers. "Officer Blake," she said, her voice shaking, "this is Judge Patricia Washington. She was appointed by the governor last month." It was in all the legal journals. Blake's face went through several changes of expression as the reality of what he'd done began to sink in. The appointment letter in Chen's hands bore the official state seal. Several other attorneys had pulled out their phones, some to call courthouse administration, others to document what they were witnessing. "I... She didn't," Blake stammered, but the words seemed to die in his throat. Patricia finally spoke, her voice steady despite the pain in her cheek. "Officer Blake, in about 30 minutes, I'm going to put on judicial robes for the first time and swear to uphold justice for all people who enter this courthouse. Have you ever faced something like this? Share your experience in the comments below." So the question is, what kind of justice starts with violence? Chief Judge Morrison's arrival changed the entire atmosphere of the lobby. At 72, he'd presided over the Hamilton County courts for nearly 3 decades, and his reputation for fairness was matched only by his intolerance for misconduct in his courthouse. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor caused the gathered crowd to step back respectfully. "What in God's name is happening in my courthouse?" His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to maintaining order in the most chaotic situations. Attorney Chen stepped forward, still holding Patricia's scattered papers. "Chief Judge, this is Judge Washington." Officer Blake refused to accept her credentials and then she gestured toward Patricia's still reddened cheek. Morrison's eyes moved from Blake's defensive posture to Patricia's composed dignity, and his expression darkened. "Judge Washington, I am profoundly sorry. This is not the welcome we prepared for you, and it's certainly not the standard of conduct we maintain in this courthouse." Blake finally found his voice. "Sir, I didn't know. She looked... I've never seen her before, and..." "Officer Blake," Morrison's voice cut through the excuse like a blade. "In 15 years, have you ever struck another courthouse visitor? Ever?" The question hung in the air. Blake's shoulders sagged slightly. "No, sir." "Then your explanation isn't about unfamiliarity, is it? It's about something else entirely." Morrison turned to Patricia with genuine concern. "Judge Washington, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Patricia touched her cheek gently. The physical pain was already fading, but she could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. This was her moment to set the tone for her entire judicial career. Her response would be remembered, discussed, and likely influence how she was perceived for years to come. Chief Judge, I'm not seriously injured, but I am concerned about what this incident represents. If a sitting judge can be treated this way in her own courthouse, what does that say about how ordinary citizens might be treated here? Morrison nodded gravely. That's exactly the right question, and it deserves a thorough answer. He turned to Blake. Officer, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Please surrender your security credentials and escort badge. The transformation in Blake's demeanor was immediate. The authority he'd wielded so carelessly just minutes earlier evaporated. If you've been moved by this journey, subscribe for more heartfelt stories that matter. Patricia watched him remove his badge with shaking hands, understanding that true justice often begins with accountability. 3 months later, Patricia sat in her chambers, reviewing the final report on the Blake incident. The investigation had been thorough and fair, exactly what she'd hoped for. Blake had been terminated and charged with assault, but more importantly, the courthouse had implemented comprehensive bias training and a civilian oversight process for all security personnel. The knock on her door interrupted her reading. "So I'd come in." Chief Judge Morrison entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd witnessed positive change. "I thought you might want to see this." He handed her a letter bearing the courthouse administration seal. Patricia read quietly, her expression shifting from curiosity to genuine surprise. The letter outlined new courthouse protocols developed in response to her incident, protocols that would ensure no visitor would face discrimination again. But the surprise came at the end. The new training program would be named the Patricia Washington Dignity Initiative. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "No, you didn't, but you earned it by how you handled that morning. You could have demanded Blake's head on a platter. You could have made it about personal revenge. Instead, you made it about systemic change." Patricia fingered her grandmother's ring, thinking of the woman who'd worked in this building's shadows decades ago. "My grandmother used to say that dignity isn't about how people treat you. It's about how you treat people, even when they don't deserve it." Morrison smiled. "Wise woman. How's your first quarter been?" "Challenging, rewarding, exactly what I hoped for." Patricia looked out her window at the courthouse steps where she'd arrived that first morning. "You know what's interesting? Blake sent me a letter last week. Not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement. He's enrolled in community college, taking criminal justice courses, says he wants to understand what went wrong. And how does that make you feel?" Patricia considered the question carefully. "Hopeful. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about the possibility of people becoming better than they were." The afternoon sun streamed through her office window, casting warm light across the legal books that lined her shelves. Patricia's grandmother's ring caught the light as she reached for her next case file, ready to continue the work of justice with patience, wisdom, and an unshakable belief in human dignity. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the power of grace under pressure.